Accelerate your success by impacting your community. Tips to networking and success from Orange County business leaders.
Welcome to this week's episode of the OC Impact Project podcast. My name is Robert Souza. I'll be your host today, and it is our privilege to interview Charles Antis, the owner of Antis Roofing and Waterproofing, who is a champion for good, and he believes that fulfillment comes from supporting causes that speak to your heart. And the reason that we chose Charles this week as a guest to interview is because we continued to see him pop up on social media at one nonprofit event after another. So out of curiosity, clicking on his profile, no surprise, we found that he's on the board of directors of Ronald McDonald's Foundation, Habitat for Humanity, United Way, ONE-OC, and supporter of so many other nonprofit organizations like Mothers Against Drunk Driving. So let's get started today. Charles, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Rob. I'm really excited to be here.
So let's get started by talking about helping us better understand what has inspired you to be such a force for good and involved in so many nonprofit projects throughout Orange County.
Well, gosh, I think we all end up processed by everything that occurs in our lives. And I think for me, it's a lot, just things as a kid. I grew up in a religion where service was a very important part. Only it wasn't necessarily important for me. It was just service projects were work on Saturdays. But in that same religion, which I'm no longer a member of, but in that my parents' religion, I went to Thailand. And I was doing a mission over there, but proselyting was mostly illegal. So we ended up doing a lot of service. And there was one day when I was in Thailand, when I'd been there a few months and I was having a hard time adjusting. I didn't love it. I didn't speak the language yet. It was hot. It was stinky to me. It was stinky because I wasn't used to it. I wasn't used to it yet. I didn't understand that I was going to love that fish sauce and be my favorite food. But when I first got there, it was assaulting to me. And one day, one of these other missionaries said, "Hey, Antis, we're going to go to this orphanage, but you're not going to like it." And he said, "It's going to smell." And as I said, I was used to that. "It's going to be uncomfortable because they mix the handicapped people, both the physically and mentally handicapped, and it's hot. And we're going to be there a while." And so I went there with a very low expectation, again, with this having service heaped upon me since I was a child, but never understanding how it served me. And I walked into this room. It's about the size of this conference room. I'm in a conference room right now. And inside this small conference room sized room in the orphanage, there were about 20 kids on the floor and they were taking a nap. When I walked in, one of them in the middle, about an 8-year-old girl, lifted up and she had the most beautiful smile. And someone had painted rosy cheeks on her, like a clown had been there. And it was about 11 o'clock in the day. And she had these really long arms and she put them up in the air. And I just always remember how that made me feel. And I instantly felt needed and useful. And I went over to pick up this cute little girl. But as I went to lift her, thinking she was going to weigh about 40 pounds, I had the shock of my life when she only weighed about 12 or 15 pounds. And I found that everything below her shoulders, below those arms, was withered. And so I awkwardly held her against me, and it was really hard. It was kind of like when your neighbor gives you a kid with a snotty-nosed kid, and you don't want to hold it. And I kind of held her like I didn't want to hold her. And I went to bounce her off. And as I went to bounce her off, I felt those long fingers dig in my back. And then suddenly I got more nervous, and my heart started beating. I didn't know what to do. And I held her for another 30 seconds. And this time I was going to get her off. And I bounced her a second time, and two things happened. Her arms circled around me tight with her fingers digging in. And then I felt something and I looked and she was smiling at me, like this smile that just like something lit up in me, that I had never felt before. There was a pause, there was an awakening of something that was never described to me. And the only way that I've described it maybe since is I grew up in Oregon and grandma cooked on a wooden stove. And I remember she had this wooden ladle she would stir that pot of soup with. And it was like grandma was stirring something up inside of me because I felt this feeling. And that is, I think, my first moment where I think I was filled and fueled by something that was outside of me that I couldn't understand. I understand it a lot better today, but I am a we're all processed into who we are by who we hang around with, and all of those groups and all of those things, if we look for the good in them, my gosh. And so that missionary experience ended up being an amazing experience of connectivity between humans that today I can try to apply to culture here at Antis Roofing. I'd say that's a good story for that.
Oh, I love the story. And it's such an amazing example of how our experiences shape who we are. And last week, I interviewed the owner of Doing Good Works, who their entire mission is about helping foster kids or foster kids who've graduated into the adult life. And it's amazing. Each business owner has their own experience that inspires them to move in a certain direction. So absolutely love the story and the visuals. I wanted to ask you about, I had read recently that Janice, and I think if I pronounce it correctly, Wolicki, who's the CEO of Make-A-Wish Idaho, said, "You are one of the most community-minded professionals she knows." And I'm going to ask how you can help us better understand what's driven you to support such causes. But you kind of just answered that question. But I'll give you kind of elaborate.
I do want to elaborate because you mentioned something earlier. There's something in the minds. I do remember my grandfather, who's now deceased. He was about 98 when he died about 5 years ago. But my grandpa, he grew up in the Depression. Utah Carroll Huffman. He grew up in Arkansas. He came west. He was a migrant worker. He picked beets in Idaho. He did all sorts of crop work and ended up in Northern California, where he got a real job with a company that was building community. It was called McLeod Lumber Company. And and that's when this was the timber capital of the world. But he got in there and they built hospitals and they brought in schools. They brought in teachers. They brought in 36 teachers, some of the best in the state. And they brought them in. They even built a baseball team. And that was Grandpa's love. And they became so good that Grandpa got a tryout for the St. Louis Cardinals. And I laugh. I don't know why I'm crying, because Grandpa told that story so many times. I can still impersonate. He'd say, "God damn it, Charlie, there I was on the plate and that fastball came by." I still can tell those stories because Grandpa was a storyteller. But I love looking back, and my mom remembers what it was like living in the McLeod lumber. Mother McLeod, they called it, where if you had a leaky faucet or a light bulb that turned out, they sent somebody to fix it. Why is that not a good idea anymore? But I remember something else. When I was 5 years old, it was about like maybe 1968, 1969. I'm at the Wooden Nickel Day Parade in Myrtle Creek, Oregon, in that logging area where everybody worked. Every man that I knew worked with his hands. He was a blue collar man, except this one guy. His name was John Shirtcliffe. And he was different. And he was in parade at the end of the Wooden Nickel Days parade, and he was handing something to us kids. And I ran out there, and he gave me a dime. And maybe that was enough to buy a couple candy bars back then. But he made me feel like he didn't have to do that. I didn't have those words then, but why is this guy, he's just another man here. Why is he doing something for me? And why does he give me this toy? Why is he pausing on me? Does he see me higher than I can see myself? Could I be him someday? Well, I didn't know that's what I wanted, but that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be John Shirtcliffe. I wanted to do it because he can. And so I think as a business owner, we can do that. We can do what Mother McLeod did. We can say, yeah. Why not? Why not say, yeah, situationally? I've said yes so many times. Eventually, I learned that, oh my gosh, I can afford to be generous with all my stakeholders. I don't know how that works, but by gosh, I've discovered if I do, I think I end up with a better bottom line. I don't know how that works, but I also sleep way better at night.
And the stories are so amazing because it really encapsulates the idea that when we choose to give and share, we speak to people's core needs and their spirits, and we have no idea what we're going to experience that particular day and how it may change someone's life. And I think from the corporate world of people getting up and going to work every single day and the monotony of life sometimes and paying bills, there's something about the experience of giving back and what you have no idea what personally, spiritually, profitably may or may not come back to you. every day is exciting to wake up, and your story definitely is a perfect example of that, and I can see how that's shaped who you are. Um, the next question, based on another statement that was made about you from another CEO, they said that you're changing the world one roof at a time. So help me make the connection. You started to kind of get into it a little bit in your last story, but how do you explain the connection between the philanthropy and the for-profit side of business? Help me better understand for those business leaders who are, working 60 hours a week, and why do I need to spend time doing philanthropy because I don't have the time to? I'd like to, but I don't have the time to. What's the connection that you've seen? Not that you, well, I mean, from an outside after perspective, what has been the benefit that you didn't intend from the beginning?
Well, there's so many, but let me say, first of all, I'm lucky that I'm in the roofing profession. There's something very tribal in the roofing of what I do. I provide that basic shelter. I don't know why that's making me emotional right now, but it is very important that we understand that who we are. And I think, and so when something happened to me over the years and somebody came to me and they had a leak in their home, this is where their children live. And they couldn't, and they didn't have the money to get their family dry. What am I going to do? I mean, it wasn't comfortable. It was painful. There were times I wondered if I would be able to pay the mortgage. But you know what? I never let a family have a leaky roof just because it didn't have the money to pay. And so I start from that. And here's the cool thing is I found it took years to reach out and become part of the national roofing families, the NRCA, the Roofing Alliance. I had our board meeting today. But I find that we're struck with the same conditions. So I'm coming from an added advantage of being this. And, and I've done that. I've been that roofing expert. I did I did a habitat build on Mongolia. It was called I think they called it a global village build. They had factions from all over the world, New Zealand, Australia, China, Japan. We had in Orange County in LA, and there were like 12 of us came from Orange County. And I was an expert there. I was a roofing expert. And there was a construction expert, and it turned out on this camp with these crude materials, there was some really cool stuff we were doing, but I was the most expert in roofing in that. And it was a tremendous responsibility. It was a week of responsibility that I hope I never have to repeat, because I had to make sure they were dry. And some of the principles that I was saying to people were counterintuitive to them, but I had to make sure that they did their laps right. Now, not everybody did it right, but that responsibility was huge. And I don't know why I'm telling you that story, but I take my profession very seriously. So if you take your profession very seriously, then there's a need in your community. And for me, it's really simple. This is also very tribal. Everybody that I know has this condition. Everybody that I love has this condition. And that is that we believe everybody deserves a decent place to live. That's what we say at Habitat for Humanity. And what we say at Antis is we live to keep families safe and dry. And so once you start laying it out, there's tremendous logic as to why this works. Because people don't make decisions with their smart brains, with their second brains. We make decisions with our reptilian brain, that instant reaction. That's how we make decisions. So I appeal to that brain. Our brand appeals to, and Ronald McDonald House, I'm wearing these socks right now. People that love Ronald McDonald House may not know why it hits them like this. It's a love of children. It's a love that says, it is unimaginable to ignore children that are sick, that need attention, even to ignore them in any way. And that is something that draws people to you, and it makes sense. And so I can explain a lot of reasons by when you get into philanthropy, it is, we'll talk about it. It's 50-50. It's hard. It's intent. It's love. It's thinking bigger, way bigger than yourself. And then it's 50%. How can I tell this story so it's repeatable? Because if it's not repeatable, then it's not sustainable. But if you can do something that's good for your people, for the community, for the people that work for you, for all of your stakeholders, and everybody benefits, and it's repeatable, now you change the world.
Yeah, and in today's society, many companies engage in corporate philanthropy, but for mixed reasons. But CFO Linda Shepard says that your motivation comes from a personal moral obligation. It's such a great description of you. So my question for you is, would you continue to volunteer if there was absolutely no personal benefit to you or your company?
If there was no personal benefit to me or my company, would I continue to volunteer? Yes. So there's so many layers of benefit though, because my company, let's talk about my company's employees and their families. Yes. If I go out into the field and my office and my field, we have two different sets of employees. We have office workers that look much like office workers in most offices of Orange County, multi-ethnicity. If we go into the field, we have an immigrant labor force, primarily Hispanic, mostly Mexican, and that grew up with a whole different set of opportunities and fears. And so what we need is to build the bridge all the way to everybody, no matter what. And so there's so many layers of benefits of putting purpose and intent. The intent to build bridges all the way to everybody in your company, no matter what. The intent to be generous with everybody, no matter what in your company, to the point of excess, to never getting the good deal, to being, as the employer, I can't cut a deal against anybody, no matter what. When you start to think that way, I think everything starts to flip. And then, when culture and brand seemingly go simultaneously, when culture tries to go above brand, or when brand tries to go above culture, culture's going to pull it down because culture doesn't support it. When culture gets real high, it can lift brand. But if you get your insides and your outsides matching, if you get your people that what you're saying inside is matching what people are saying on the outside, then you have this magic space that you could call your brand's hovering. I mean, I call it relevance. Being relevant in the moment is really valuable. When, right now that you have asked me to be on your podcast, I take that with a very heavy responsibility, not heavy, important responsibility. If I do this well, then people can benefit. If I share well what's working, then I have a chance of keeping it. Also, if I listen to your questions carefully, you're going to let me see something slightly different than I ever saw before. Maybe I'll figure this out a little better, which again will make me a better opportunity to stay. Or maybe I'll get a reciprocation from somebody in Malibu who's doing the same thing, and they have an idea. So it's like there's a vulnerability in business today that I think you're asking people and CEOs to give. And what I'm here to tell you is if you say yes to it, your life will open. Speaking of that, I'm very proud of a book that came out a few months ago by Bebo Calandro, a very famous CSR whisperer to CEOs around the world. It's called Doing Good at Work. And she quotes me in that book. She even drew a little picture of me. And it's on page 143. I'm just signing copies right now and sending it out. I say, I don't remember saying this, but it's something I would say. I say, it takes guts to be vulnerable at work, but it actually makes everything easier. I don't remember saying that, but I thought, well, that's true. It's exactly how I feel. It's like once I took that tough guy mask off and told you I don't know when I don't know, and I'll tell you what's working, I'll tell you what's not working. What you'll notice, though, I won't ever say it at the expense of anybody. Right. And once you get a team that's used to that, of real honesty, talking about how things really are, it's so refreshing because there's a lot of posturing in business, people protecting what they have. But if you can really create a lateral environment where everybody's respected and all words and everything, every question is okay. I mean, that's what we're trying to accomplish here. It's not perfect, but I can tell you that at Antis Roofing, we have the best culture we've ever had. And because of that, we install the best roofs we've ever installed. I'll probably talk more about that later.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And just taking from what you're sharing, intent is everything. I think just saying yes, you don't know what the opportunity may or may not be for you or someone else, but don't pause to consider what's in it for you. If you take the intent out, just move forward, say yes, and build tribes and partnerships that everybody benefits, and usually much more than we expect. And it's such a great story, and you put it so much better than I ever could, which is why I'm on a podcast. So I just wanted to continue with what Linda Shepard shared, but the next quote that she shared was that your work ethic is commendable and your energy is infectious, which is also why we brought you on the podcast. So help me better understand the direct correlation between the causes that people believe in and their work ethic in the work that they do on the job.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, well, cause has to show up pure. In other words, cause can't have condition, and that's what makes it beautiful. If you believe that children should not be ignored, then that has to apply to all children. And I think what causes do is certain nonprofits hold those causes so purely that it allows everybody to hear you. But to me, the primary cause for me is, it happens to men in their 50s a lot. Now, I'm not saying I know anything about that, except I've read that. And it's definitely true for me, is legacy becomes such an important thing, and what's legacy? It's like, what's that, what you leave behind? I think you start to realize accumulation of things doesn't do anybody any good, really, including you. However, how you leave something is, and that comes back down to something my father, I think, really instilled in me. And he said it, but he more lived it. And that is, Dad's voice, son, always do the right thing, and it's so funny because, it just was my essence of my father and my mom, but my dad, it's like, in anything, do the right thing. And then I think that's suddenly becoming sexy, doing the right thing. It's like, and not saying you're doing the right thing, but showing it. And the only way you can show it is to be involved with cause. And it's amazing. You can't help but show it in some authentic way. And to be involved with cause, it requires really being involved. But that's, I think of my dad, and, you think of your father. My dad's not perfect, but he always did the right thing. Now, I remember him and my mom arguing when he loses his temper, like that little patterned argument they have. Well, Dave, remember that time you did that? I tease them about it now. You remember I just had that same argument all the time. But my dad, he always, pay his taxes because it's the right thing. Well, you wouldn't have to pay this. Well, that's not the right thing. It's like, gosh, Dad, it was a toll on me. Today, there's something sexy about it. If you can show you're having fun doing the right thing. And by the way, when you say you're doing the right thing, oh, shoot, that means people are going to hold you to it. Right on. Wow. Why did that used to be so scary to me? So I'm going to say that I'm going to be the best CEO, all right? I'm going to err on the side of generosity with all of my stakeholders. What did I just say? I just freed myself from the old entanglements that I needed somehow to hold on tight. That scarcity thing that used to, there is, when you imagine that you can, then you will. Though, as you have proven also true, when you imagine you cannot, you are just as correct.
Yeah. And the story of your dad talking to you so seems like it translates into you as a CEO almost fulfilling the role of your father to employees. Like, help us better understand too, how do you select employees and how do you help them discover what inspires them? And does it connect with the causes of Antis Roofing?
Yes, that's a good question. I think we've learned over the years to not hire by experience, but hire by alignment and values. The perfect example of that is my VP, Susan DeGrassi. She's over HR and cause, very accomplished business leader in the nonprofit world and in the for-profit world. And just watching her develop, watching her, I don't know, it's when you put people in an environment and you say, okay, I'm going to try to create my perfect job and be the best CEO I can and attract and retain the best talent. But I also want you to create your perfect job, which means I can't patrol you too hard. I can only compliment you. I'm really there to support your ideas. And you can ask me questions, but I can only cheerlead you, which is that's the criteria I have for myself.
Right.
I can promise you I'm not perfect at that, but I'm way better at that than I've ever been. In fact, I'm 1,000 times more positive than I've ever been. And and therefore a lot better boss. I think I'll freak some people out because what is it? If you're new here, you got to get used to Charles. How come he's not asking me for meetings all the time? Well, you gave him the numbers. Oh, okay. It's like, I think that, but when there's something magic, when you really assess people, we've done a ton of assessments. I believe in assessments. Emotional intelligence assessment is so good for you, and you'll laugh at yourself, you'll poke yourself, but wow, it's amazing how accurate EQ testing is for helping you understand why we behave the way we do, or even your DISC. why you behave the way you do at work. And that's what DISC is. DISC is, if you're an animal and you're surviving in the jungle, you're either going to be dominant, you're going to be popular, you're going to be middle of the pack, you're going to be cautious. And by understanding how everybody survives, you learn to take the language of fighting out instead of the language of inclusion. Oh, of course, when I speak to Aaron, my nephew, who's a high D and a low I got to be brief, bright, and gone. It's not because he's rude or because he's impatient. That's just how he's drawn. And so we understand each other. So I do that. We've done deeper assessments. We've done the Purpose Lab assessment from Imperative. And that's the most incredible thing that I ever got. The most incredible self-assessment was going to Seattle to the Imperative Lab, spending a week and letting these CEOs work together in this think tank where we really understand what fulfills us. And I'll speak to me on this. And this, I found that I was never a good tutor and I was hard on myself. When I tutored my daughter in math, my 22-year-old daughter, when she was 6, I'm not doing it with my same 6-year-olds now. One day she stopped and I said something like, Allie, you're going to be the only girl in the class that doesn't get this. Which was really, really mean, but I couldn't see it. I was worried, and it came out, and she started crying, and she pointed at me, and she's, Dad, you're mean, and she was right. And when I manage people at work, I'm like, I can be like a seagull boss, flapping your wings and all over everybody, and that's. But when I went to this lab, they assessed me, and this is why assessment's so big. They said, Charles, and it was actually the VP of Phantom Cruise Lines, one of Carnival Cruise Lines, and their HR director, they were in my pod and they helped diagnose this, what fulfills me, my superhero. And they said, Charles, you're not a good tutor. That's not who you are. You're not really meant to manage. You are an ambassador. You awaken passion in others for social change. That happened to me 5 years ago. You never heard me before then because I didn't understand that thing that I thought that fulfilled me, made me a bad CEO until I read who I was, understood my DISC, I understand my EQ, I understand my imperative model. I understand that if I'm going to be happy, and oh, by the way, if I want to do the best thing I can for my roofing company, then let me be all of who I am and let me assess my other people and find out what it is that fulfills them. So that's what we've done. We've done a lot of work on it. I wish I could tell you the same work that we've done in the office has been done in the field. We've been very hampered by language abilities and some of the assessment tools that we're using. But now we're building out a very fitting program by available outside resources that allow us to build it to what's the Hispanic language? Why is that hard for me to say? Because we just didn't have that ability. But yes, man, it's powerful when you invest in your people. So I'm all in. It's an inside-outside investment. And I think it's easy as an entrepreneur who wants to do philanthropy to overly push your outside. I have a poster in here that I'm not, I actually ripped up one of these. This is our giving from 2018. And I love things that say like, we gave to 17 nonprofit board committee and advisory council positions our company fills. We had 1,400 volunteer hours. We had 6 summer interns and job shadowing, but 354,000 Antis grants. That doesn't do anything. I want to talk about the stories of people being impacted. And I want my people, when they see that, to be proud. I want them to go, well, hey, we lost money that year. I didn't get a bonus. It has to balance out. And so, but here's what I'm doing. I'm experimenting with generosity. I was too generous that year in the community. Do I regret it? No. We benefited, the community benefited, my team and I learned something. And I've been maybe too generous inside, but do I regret it? No. Remember, that's my job, to err on the side of generosity. And if you do that, you're going to be on a podcast like me going, wow, I don't know why this works, but it really works.
And the best bad mistake you can make, being overly generous. And you kind of answered my last question as we wrap up, which was what piece of advice you'd give to help Orange County business owners take their business to the next level. But just to recap on what you just said, understanding your own strengths and weaknesses, your own ability, that self-assessment allows you to build a team. If you're also aware of their assessment, you build a team around you that allows you to stay within your strengths and build a team that can take on all the rest based on their strengths. And when you do that, that's when people elevate people. Even your lowest level employee can elevate you because they're doing that one thing that you're just not good at. For me, follow up with emails. I had to hire a virtual assistant who's great with people and loves follow up because it's just.
I think you're absolutely right. I call that though. I call that that's 100% agree. Though before that, to be heard, my advice would be to the CEO, find the cause that fulfills you, that cause that's near and dear to your heart that may, looking back now, tie into experience like mine when you were 19 that you couldn't see until you were in your 40s or 50s. Or it may tie into an opportunity or a loss in your life. And then if that cause, if that one cause also aligns with your brand and people like me, there's a lot of us that will gladly help you brainstorm that and say, does that align and why doesn't it align? And if there's a nonprofit that has a CEO that's strong, and they have to be stronger, you're going to get caught up in a lot of passion that's not going anywhere. And you have board members that have what you want. I mean, board members that literally have the traits that you want. Then you join that nonprofit on a committee and you watch how you start being heard. You watch how you see yourself. And I think that's what I want you to do. If you want to attract these people, you have to see yourself higher. I'm a roofing contractor. I used to hide my hands in my pocket because I didn't want you to see the cracked nails and the caulking in the nails. I mean, I held my hands in my pocket. And today you see me, you know, I'm proud. I'm proud that I'm a roofing pro. It's these hands that keep everything that you love safe and dry. And I say that with confidence and with power. And I want you to have the same power, and you find that through cause. And then when you get cause, your roofs get better than they've ever been because people care. And it gets to this, that we have an interior model that goes to the outside, a model that our men in the field that we say, and that's that every nail matters. There's 200,000 parts in the average roof we install. And let me tell you, there's nothing similar about two identically spec'd roofs side by side. They're both spec'd for 30 years. One's going to last 30, one's only going to last 11 if they're installed by two different people, because every nail matters, just like in life and kind of stuff we've talked about. Everything matters. And it's amazing the difference. And if you come to Antis Roofing, I'd love to take you on a tour of Antis campus and you could see we're not low bid. I mean, how could we be when there's no tracking going on? There's no ability. You come in Antis Roofing, you see, in fact, if you're going to spend the money it costs to get a 200,000 part roof, come inside. You would be silly to not come inside and look under the hood, because you'll see why you get every year you bought in your roof. And more than 2/3 of the roof life purchased is thrown in the landfills, but not with us. There's a reason why. So it ties into purpose. Our roofs didn't get to that quality until we decided what mattered most. It didn't get that way. When I'm a great salesman, I'm a great production on a job, but if I spend my time there, then I'm just doing that. Instead, if I want to build the best company, I spend my time in cause, I find alignment with folks, and I have a perspective that's unique and honest. And it always puts community in the long game first. And it took a while to get here, but it's attainable.
It's amazing. And you're always one question ahead of me, or answer ahead of my questions, but absolutely. Finding cause definitely is the foundational principle, which you have not talked about. You've lived and you've demonstrated that, and you've shown the results of that. And I think that's the takeaway from this for me. And I want to share to other business owners is find your cause, find your purpose, help your staff find their cause and purpose, make sure there's alignment there. And the impact can be so exponentially raised. And working together, there's also synergy within the community, like you said, the right nonprofits and strategic partners. And all of that can take businesses to a level that they never even imagined. And that's what we're trying to help inspire business owners to believe, that they can do so much more than they're thinking that they can do right now. And they just have to think outside the box and be open to saying yes and having new experiences, discover their strengths, discover their purpose, and help their employees do the same. And unbelievable opportunities are ahead for all of us. And so we're so excited for everything that you've shared today. Before we wrap up, how, you talked about tour, you talked about, the unique sales proposition for Antis Roofing, but I'm going to give you the last few minutes to just share a little bit about Antis and why doing business with you can help make a greater impact, not only for them as the consumer, but also for the community.
Well, we've been around for 31 years, and that says a lot for roofing companies when 3 out of 5 go out of business every 3 years. But really, we service the HOA market. So you live in a multi-tenant community from Malibu to San Diego. We service more HOAs than anyone. And the reason we do is we're focused on keeping those families safe and dry. And the stories that I told you you understand how important we hold that. And when we say every nail matters, like I said, the guys in the field take that seriously. There's nothing similar about 2 identical roofs. Spec similarly, one will last more than twice as long as the other. And so at Antis Roofing, we made a history out of this. And in servicing communities, there's a knee jerk sometimes to re-roof. And when you re-roof prematurely, you end up filling landfills. In fact, over 23% of our landfills across the country are filled with roofing material. And we need to slow that down. And so one of the things that we discovered is at Antis Roofing, we can go into a community where they're under-maintained. And unfortunately, we find that a lot. And we can put them on a plan in the special ops project where we can take their weak areas, rebuild them, make them strong. And we can get all of the usable life out of the roof. And then when we sell you a new roof and we sell you a 40-year roof, it lasts 40 years, not 18, the average. And so I think that's an important principle. And the way you understand that, I'm kind of being repetitive, but now that you ask the question, you come and you look and you see what you have. And if you see the storage, you see the records we store, how we protect you by uploading 6,000 photos a day. You see the way we hold every communication in the Salesforce complete ERP system. And we use this big expense because in the long run, you spend so much less getting all of the usable life. And also we have great customer care. We protect you, but you can only experience this. So I invite you, if you live in an HOA, to insist on Antis Roofing. Because if you use Antis Roofing inside your community, you'll experience something with your roofing community that you haven't experienced before. And as we like to say, you'll be sure, you'll be safe, you'll be good. And I'll leave it at that. So thank you.
I appreciate your time today. I am personally going to send this podcast to every HOA board member that I am connected with, because
Thank you.
I've been through that process. I've been on boards before. We repiped a 4,000 unit complex, and it's no small task. And the company they chose as the lowest bid, we've had probably 8% that have had leaks in 3 years after repiping. So
I've seen that happen so often. And, it happens, unfortunately, with the best intent, but sometimes that board coming in is tempted by that low price. And suddenly, it seems like a big delta between where you're at, and I'm looking at when their price is below my cost, I know I'm getting better prices than they are, then it says a lot, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Charles, thank you so much. Your time's valuable, and we appreciate the privilege of having this time with you today. And
thanks, Rob.
We'll continue to stay connected. We will list all of the causes that you support and make sure that we continue to repost any events that you can invite others to come and support and join you to make a greater impact. We'll list all of that in the description and notes below. And
please follow me on LinkedIn. We're at Antis. We're active on all social media channels, but I am personally only active on LinkedIn. But I'm very active in talking about the principles that we spoke of today.
And
let's connect.
Exactly that. And so we're going to put those all listed below. Definitely connect on LinkedIn, because the OC Impact Project and Antis Roofing are most active on that platform, and where we'll be posting today's podcast. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Charles Antis, and we look forward to seeing you all.
Pleasure.
This podcast is sponsored by the AFI Group, who's developed a financial literacy program to help families reduce debt, save more, and reduce taxes to increase the average family's lifetime income by more than $1 million. The AFI Group is currently donating this program to organizations that want to help their employees improve their financial wellness. If you'd like to learn more, click on the link below to schedule a 15-minute phone call or just simply text 949-377-0028.